Hey everybody. So Super Smash Bros. Is a classic console fighting game that's been a source of entertainment for a lot of people over a lot of years. There's something weirdly engaging about a game where your sole objective is to beat up a bunch of other people with unusual objects in a variety of locations. But what does this have to do with Minecraft? Well, as with just about any other major franchise, Super Smash Bros. Got a Minecraft map treatment of its own. Welcome back to Minecraft Maps 10 years later, a series where I take a look at some of Minecraft's most famous maps and play them in a recent version to see just how well they hold up to the test of time. Last episode I played through Biger's The Dropper, a map that remained relatively intact after a decade, simply due to the fact that 90% of its gameplay just involves falling down big holes. But today we're going to be looking at something a little more complex. Today's subject is the map Super Craft Bros by legendary command block and redstone engineer Sethbling, and this map sorta differs from the previous two I've taken a look at. Herobrine's Mansion was an adventure map where you follow a storyline. Beating stuff up and breaking things usually takes a backseat to the narrative. The Dropper was a challenge map where the player is given a simple objective and told to complete it by any means necessary. Super Craft Bros, unique little character that it is a minigame map. Now, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with minigames. Today you got whole servers devoted to them that let you run around in lobbies and look at scoreboards and wonder how the hell this one dude got 500,000 kills. But minigame maps made in the early 2010s, like Hypixel's original Walls map, Cops and Robbers, basically anything by FV Disco, these are all the distant ancestors of the minigame servers we know today. And Super Craft Bros is one of the biggest players in this arena. The concept was simple. You and a couple friends get together, throw this map up on a crusty free server host, and spend the afternoon beating the crap out of said friends in a variety of arenas. The world featured different combat classes, a wide variety of maps, power-ups, and all sorts of other cool stuff, all operated with nothing but redstone circuits and command blocks. So without further ado, let's boot it up and check it out. This time we gotta do things a little differently. It's kinda hard to play a multiplayer map with one person, so for this video I've acquired the help of Chris. Everyone be sure to thank Chris for his wonderful assistance. After setting up the world on a free server, we joined and began the game. Or at least we tried. I normally try to start these videos by explaining what I did, then commenting on what's failed in the past 10 years, but with this map that's kind of impossible. Because it's broken. Not one small part of it. The whole map is just broken. Let me take you through the disaster. We spawned in on a platform pretty much identical to the one in Herobrine's Mansion, designed to TP you to the place you're supposed to start in case Minecraft doesn't do what you want it to. Once again, we got the old syntax which doesn't do anything, so I flew over to the actual starting arena and brought Chris with me. The first thing the world has you do is read some rules, which Chris proceeded to destroy, and then choose your team. But all that really happened was we got punched in the face with a piston. This system's supposed to prevent you from choosing a team that's already been picked, but since the piston's the only thing that still works, it just gives you a love tap and then nothing actually happens. Looking behind the scenes, we can see it's yet another broken TP command, so I executed it manually, bringing me and Chris to a little wool sarcophagi where the actual team command system is supposed to activate. But this didn't work either. While Chris started breaking stuff again, I went outside the bounds to investigate the issue, and it turns out the way this map does teams is really funky. The scoreboard command framework, implemented in game specifically to do team-related stuff, didn't exist when Sethbling made the map, so instead he used experience levels, of all things. The command blocks are supposed to give players in different teams different XP levels, so the game can then determine who's in what team. Again, I find it super interesting seeing the weird little workarounds map makers develop when they don't have much to work with, but unfortunately these commands were also broken. I manually assigned XP points to me and Chris just in case the map would be able to do something with it, and then manually brought us to the next location. In the meantime, Chris fell out of the world. This has nothing to do with the map, he just did that. The next room was the coolest by far. You get to choose your class from a number of in-game mobs, including the Blaze, Skeleton, Enderman, and Cactus. The selector uses this super old-school map art, probably one of the earliest examples of custom map art in-game, and it looks pretty good. Chris chose the Cactus, I chose the Skeleton, and wouldn't you know it, absolutely nothing happened. Yet another broken string of command blocks made the TP process impossible, but this time there were some other issues to make things a little bit harder. You see, after you select a class, the world is supposed to teleport you into this tiny little box where it shoots out a bunch of items at you. It seems weird, but this is actually how most maps dealt with custom items before the give command got its own NBT arguments. We saw this briefly in Herobrine's Mansion, where boss loot was dropped from the ceiling. Basically, the map maker would edit in custom items, slap them into some dispensers, and let those dispensers give them to the players. But these dispensers contain nothing but air. I don't know if it's the specific copy of the map that I have, or if some weird shenanigans occurred in the version conversion, but the items to be dispensed just aren't there. This is a problem for us, since it's kinda hard to tell if Chris is supposed to be the cactus and I'm supposed to be the skeleton if both of us don't have any gear. But we persisted. I used /give to give us items I sort of thought fit the characters we chose, and manually brought us to the map selection room. We both chose the end, and for the first time in millennia the TP command actually worked, since the target selector was everyone. But our success was short-lived. We were brought to a big metal control system that, in theory, was supposed to operate the fighting matches and scoreboards and such, but obviously it didn't work since we remained sealed away forever inside a metal capsule, Iron Lung style. So once again, I traveled outside the box to finally bring us into the actual arena, and that was kind of a letdown too. The arena was fine. I mean, it's called the end, what do you expect? It's got a lot of height variation, it's a pretty good size, and it's got some water and stage hazards in the form of the actual bottomless pit you fall into if you walk off the edge. But without teams or character gear or a scoreboard or anything else, the game just wasn't a game at all. We smacked each other around for a while, but it just wasn't cutting it. Unfortunately, 90% of this map just doesn't work. The dropper was mostly player-driven, so it was almost entirely functional. Herobrine's Mansion had some practical elements, so it still worked in a general sense. But Super Craft Bros is just so command-driven that when you take it forward 15 versions, it just collapses under its own complexity. Now, obviously, I'm not trying to diss on Sethbling or any other map makers for that matter. Maps like this are exceedingly well made and precisely engineered. It's just that when a map maker designs this kind of map, they understand they're taking on the risk that it won't stand up to the test of time. And what we got almost a decade later is a map that just ain't no fun. But we weren't going to give up just yet. There exists a revamped version of this map, a sort of Game of the Year collector's edition, if you will. Created by Shinique with authorization from Sethbling, this 2015 map for 1.9 was designed to not only modify the game for newer versions, but also to add a mountain of new features. I mean, seriously, this thing is loaded with stuff. 9 characters, 13 whole maps, an entirely new item system, and so on. This was the real deal. So welcome to Minecraft Maps 7 years later, as me and Chris take a look at this slightly newer iteration to see if we can get a good game out of it. Now, stupid server hosting issues aside, the map started off really strong. And no offense to Sethbling, but he was never a spectacular builder, he mostly just stuck with the technical side of things. But Chris and I both agreed that Shinique's lobbies are really nice looking. She went with a style obviously more reminiscent of Super Mario Bros. And it's in these lobbies we can see the pile of new features we have to check out. But this is where things get a little funky. Me and Chris were able to select our teams and characters like normal, but once we started the game we got launched into a gigantic piranha plant and just died. That's it. I'm 90% certain there's supposed to be a teleport of some sort here, but nothing engages, so it's technically impossible to actually start a map without cheating. So cheat I did and brought us to the level selection zone, where we collectively had a psychotic break over the fact that one of the maps was called Pirate's Cove, and then selected it to begin playing. We didn't get the items we were supposed to, but that had never stopped us before, so we attempted to beat each other up for a little bit before we just got distracted and started exploring the arena. Items still spawned, and the arena itself was really well made. There's a ton of cool little features that were actually pretty well hidden. But just like before, we were missing one tiny little element to complete the experience. That would be a working game. Although far more of this map worked than its original counterpart, it was still a command-heavy map made with 1.9 mechanics, and as such, it becomes a non-functioning mess once brought to the present again. In all honesty, Super Craft Bros is probably one of the worst possible maps I could have picked for an experiment like this. Not that it's inherently broken, this was a world engineered perfectly to work as a game within a game using mechanisms most could only dream of. But it was engineered for a time that no longer exists, and with so little of the map being driven by player action, once the machinery fails, the whole map is soon to follow. That's the price we pay for new features and such, although I admit the constant push to change long-held standards, like command syntax, does get a little annoying after a while. But in the end, what it means for map makers is that the worlds they create can be ever larger and more intricate, and that more and more becomes possible with each passing update. Or something like that. I don't know. I'm not an expert. Now, to finish things off, let's go out of bounds a little bit and check out some weird stuff we're not supposed to see. It turns out the room me and Chris visited to select our level in the 2016 map was actually not the correct selection room at all. The real one surrounds the piranha plant and looks a lot more finished, obviously. I don't really know what this room is for, actually. It's just an unfinished and inaccessible version of the main select room, but it connects to all the same maps and is fully functional, so who really knows what's going on there? The way that items spawn in the map is really clever, and it's a method that's been used since time immemorial. A mob spawner configured to spawn custom items over a huge area. It's an effective and sleek way to handle random item generation, and it's been in use for quite a long time. I mean, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Below the initial spawn location are what I can only assume are unit tests for these exact item spawner systems, so if you end up down there somehow, you can relax and watch a bunch of random shit spawn really quickly. As can probably be expected, this map's got a lot more under the hood than the original, and Shineek chose to put most of it in the spawn region. So after checking out the spawner zone, you can basically access everything but the individual level control boxes. There's some other weird stuff, including a demo scene for the map off in the corner, which I thought was just really bizarre because it never comes up during gameplay. And the list kind of goes on. I mean, I've done my fair share of command block systems in my time. I know what it's like to have a bunch of weird systems that only you understand. But the sheer amount of unexplainable things in this map just defies comprehension. You got your standard teleport command blocks marked with creepy armor stands, this weird little config room that looks like someone took a bite out of it and doesn't actually do anything, pumpkins and toads and number signs everywhere, I mean, geez. But honestly, the weirdest thing is that this map actually has, basically, an entire other lobby system beneath the main one. That map selection room is just the tip of the iceberg. There's whole other lobbies, character selection areas, and various miscellaneous zones that more closely resemble the style of the original map. But at some point it seems like they were just forgotten about, and the newer, cleaner lobby system was built on top. This is all a little odd, so excuse me if I stop looking around before I hurt myself. If we go further back to the original map, there's not nearly as much bizarre stuff, but there's still some cool things to see. The original is a lot simpler, and as such the redstone and command work at the spawn region is a lot less complex. Everything in the lobby area is color-coded, and of course, made from sandstone, which if you don't know, is sort of the Sethbling standard. I touched on it before, but the vast majority of the actual inner working of the map is contained within these big level control boxes that handle scorekeeping, respawning, spectating, and so on. The 2016 remake has a similar system, and it even has the control boxes built in the same aesthetic style, which I personally think is really cool. The boxes contain, among other things, one of these old school spawner proximity detectors, which I'm pretty sure was made to TP players back in the room when they got killed. It works by exploiting a feature of spawners in which mobs only spawn when a player is in proximity to the block, thus acting as a player detector. It's so versatile that it continues to be used to this day for a variety of purposes. The maps themselves don't really have any cool features I can touch on, although I did think it was kind of funny that the village map is in fact full of villagers. Unfortunately though, they're all the green hat ones that don't trade, presumably because of their old villagers who are tragically caught up in the conversion between versions. And that's about all there is to say about Super Craft Bros. So what did we learn today? Command-heavy maps are the most likely to be screwed via version changes. Pirate's Cove is by far the best map. Chris likes breaking things. Well, whatever today's lesson was, let it be known that while this map may have crumbled pretty much to dust in the near decade since its construction, it's clearly not the fault of the map creator, the players, or even the devs. It's a natural process that we all understand must eventually come to pass. A circle of life and all that. We can still enjoy Super Craft Bros just as much as we did in 2013 if we're willing to jump back a version, or 2, or 15, and the same will be true for pretty much every other map until the end of time. But at the same time, as I think you might agree considering you're watching this video, it's always fun to take the map somewhere it was never really intended to go, and to watch the calamity unfold. Speaking of watching, if you had a good time watching this video, you can subscribe and do all the other stuff everyone's always talking about, notification bells or something like that. Up next on the menu is a map a good bit older than anything I've looked at so far, and I hope you guys enjoy when it finally comes out. And in the meantime, thanks for watching.